Hello and welcome to Widnes Rugby Chat episode 23 of 2025. We've got quite a bit to talk about in this one. We'll reflect on Widnes' defeat to Bradford. Mike will give us an update direct from the Vikings Voice Fans Forum that was held earlier this week. We'll talk about Super League 2026 and whether it is a realistic target for Widnes. We've also got an update on the player contract situation of the whole squad based on the information available to us, and we'll finish off with our usual championship predictions. So to start with, we won't dwell on it too much, Mike, but we'll reflect on the Widnes game at home to Bradford, the last game for the Vikings, ending in, sadly, another defeat, 28 points to 16 in the end. But the game was finally poised at 16 all, and where do you think it went wrong at the end?
Yeah, I think it was a spirited performance, wasn't it, James? I think 28-16 was probably a little bit harsh on Widnes, to be quite honest with you. I thought, certainly the first half we went toe to toe and was good value for our lead. I just think key moments where you look back, a couple of line breaks where we've let ourselves down, and obviously the quality that Bradford have put together and the budget that they've got, players like Luke Hooley, Waka Blade, Jake Denockenbo, they're going to take advantage, aren't they? And they did that, but I think the damage was done the week before, wasn't it? And I just, even though we was doing well in the first half, I never ever got that feeling that we was going to hold on. You looked at the interchange bench and, the limited options that Alan Coleman's got to pick from now. It's very difficult to change anything or react to certain situations. But I think they dug in, the lads. They did a really good job. It's just a shame because if you'd have played like that against Doncaster, you'd have come away with the 2 points and you could have gone into that Bradford game maybe with a little bit more momentum. But as it was a spirited defeat, but realistically now, I think that leaves us in a position where you've got to pretty much win every game to have any sort of chance of getting in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think we've talked about it in the past few weeks about the Bradford game was the only game Widnes had left against one of the top team or one of the top 4 teams. So you perhaps were expecting them to maybe be turned over by Bradford. It was a lot, I agree with you, the score probably didn't reflect how close the game was. The 2 key moments for me was, we just didn't have a load of ball in Bradford's end, but the 2 key moments was at the start of the second half, they had an opportunity off a knock-on. I think it was Ockenbaugh had knocked on and Widnes shifted it right and Mike Butt got tackled into touch, had nowhere to go on the first tackle. And when you're leading 14-10, if you can get a score on the board there and make it a 2-score game, the pattern of the second half might be different. And then the other key moment was at 16 all. It had been a bit of an arm wrestle in the middle, and Widnes got the scrum. I think it was 10 metres out in front of the post, and you were thinking, right, there was 15 minutes to go, and you were thinking, at very worst, they've got to come away with a drop goal in this situation. Ended up shifting the ball left on, I think, tackle 2 or 3 and knocking on, and the chance was gone. And that was the last real platform that they had in a match. And I wonder whether maybe it's a case of if Tom Gilmore or Jack Owens was there, maybe that situation would have panned out differently. Who knows? But it was a response to, in part, to the previous week. Of course, you don't want to say that it was a massive response because ultimately Widnes still got beat, and at the moment it's points on the board that matter. But ultimately, Bradford are one of the top teams. They've got a lot to play for, and Widnes now find themselves in a situation where with what is it, 7 or 8 games left, that you're almost, the season's almost over in some ways. But if they can string 2-3 wins together, in 3 weeks' time, we might be having a conversation where everything's on.
I, th- I think where the problem comes in is the amount of disruption we've had to go on a run of 7, 8 games. If you had a spine of Gilmore, Owens in the mix as well. Obviously, we've lost Fozzard now, we think, for a week. Mason's been out. It's just been a constant disruption, and I think obviously injuries aren't to blame for absolutely everything, but it plays a key role, certainly in your key positions. We've had numerous halfback and fullback partnerships. I've lost count how many, and it what that does is to go on a run of 6, 7 wins, which we're going to have to do if we've got any chance of grabbing a playoff spot. It's very difficult to do, and confidence as well. You can see a little bit in that Bradford game where you felt once we did go behind, we wasn't going to maybe come back, and that is a confidence thing, and I just think them things together make it a really difficult task for Widnes. But I think what the club would be doing is taking it one game at a time, and we'll be starting off going up to Sheffield. And ironically, if there's a team that's probably less confident than Widnes in the league, it's Sheffield. Their form's been all over the place, and it's it's kind of a place that we've always struggled to get victories at, but almost in the situation we're in, it's probably been going to be our best chance to get a win there in probably many years.
Yeah, Widnes now find themselves 6 points adrift of the playoffs. And interestingly, we speculated that this would happen about 6, 7 weeks ago. Both Halifax and Barrow have now dropped out of the top six. So it's Featherstone and Doncaster occupying the vacant 2 spots, if you like. Yeah, I remember a game at Sheffield a couple of seasons ago, and I thought the first half from Sheffield, I think Widnes scored right on the stroke of half time, but for 39 minutes, I thought it was one of the most complete and dominant first half performances I'd ever seen from a team, and at any level from Sheffield. They completed, they were just fully in control of the match. They did everything really well, but they're a different beast this season. So you've got the. I guess we'll go on to this in a little while. There's this possible bottom four Super Eights thing going on, but from what I'm hearing, it's going to be largely redundant. But even notwithstanding that, Widnes don't want to be finishing in the bottom four, regardless of whether there's a relegation playoff or not. And I think that's the bottom line. There will be a new face in the squad this week, all being well, because St Helens winger or fullback John Bennison has joined on an initial 2-week loan. Of course, hails from Widnes. I wonder, do you think there's a chance he'll play fullback, Mike?
Possible. I think I read Reece Williams will be missing the game due to a pre-engagement. I'm sure I've read that somewhere. So if that's true, you would assume he would slot in on the wing, perhaps.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. You are right. In the press release that came out, it did say that, but he does give Widnes that option.
Yeah, he's a quality player, isn't he? Played at a high level on the fringes at the moment at St Helens, but he's a Widnes lad, and I think that adds something. I expect nothing but John Bennison's best performance coming for Widnes, and I'm sure he'll relish putting on the jersey.
So earlier this week, there was a fans forum at the stadium, and you were there, Mike. Do you want to give a bit of a summary of what was went through?
Yeah, good evening. Obviously, Alan took the stage. He spoke about the squad situation. He highlighted the fact that it was a difficult transfer market to manoeuvre, mainly because you had players reluctant to do deals because of the uncertainty of league divisions, and obviously up until this week, the numbers that are going to be in Super League. So players are delaying on committing the futures. He said there's a couple of players at Widnes in our squad that we still haven't made a decision on in terms of the future, whether they'll be rewarded with a new deal or not. I suppose that'll remain to be seen who that'll be in the coming weeks. Stuart Murphy, which I'm sure after we finish this little section, we'll go into more detail over the IMG situation. In all fairness to Stuart, when he got on stage, I think the decision and obviously the information, it was very raw and it had just come through. And obviously, journalists were all speculating and writing articles on Twitter as that Vikings Voice evening was going through. Obviously, people will have seen Liam Bent's renewal of his contract. I'm sure you'll go into your thoughts over Liam Bent, but I think for me, Benty, he is one that he splits opinions. Some people love him, some people think the 17 should consist of different players. For me, I think the person he is and what he offers you and what he excels in and his fitness, I think every team needs a Liam Bent in the squad. Whether he plays every week, that's a different kettle of fish. But for me, probably one of the better renewals that we'll have this season. And then Ben Condon took the stage. He was, highlighting how he's loved his time over on this side of this side of the world, and saying he's really enjoying his life over here, which was a good thing to see. Obviously, the next 6 or 7 games, the quality we've seen Ben produce in moments, if there is any chance of them playoffs, you've got to feel that Ben would have a big say in any kind of push for them playoffs. And then obviously as well, myself, Tony Shaw, Sarah Jones and Kev Buck, who couldn't make the event, we are now officially announced as fan ambassadors. So our role will essentially be going into the club and having meetings with the club, giving feedback to anything and everything, really. I can't speak on behalf of the other people, but we get a lot of messages and ideas through the podcast, and ultimately we'll talk about them, James, but we're not qualified to answer some of them. So this role will allow me to feed that back to the club. And, it's not all about slapping each other on the back. It's about realistically wanting to drive this club forward and when it's needed, give a fair, not criticism, but like constructive criticism of where we need to grow and try and improve the club, and obviously give fans a voice. So for anybody who has anything for me to feedback, they're more than welcome to message me. I'm obviously in the Bridge Suite as well after games, and I sit in the North Stand. So anybody who wants to pull me for a chat or anything like that to know a little bit more, I'm always willing to take my time out for everybody and anybody. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit on that. But overall, a positive evening and a bit of a difficult time to have it, really. I think it's quite easy to put them nights on when everything's fine and dandy. I think it's actually more important to put them nights on and offer a Q&A session for supporters when the going gets tough.
Yeah, so the big talking point was, of course, this news that Super League's going to be running with 14 teams next season, and perhaps even bigger news than that was the fact that 12 of them will be decided by who's top 12 in the IMG grading, which happens at the end of this season, and then there'll be 2 other clubs recommended by a supposedly independent panel. You'll have seen plenty of conjecture about that, I'm sure, and I'm sure we'll talk about that here. But the club issued a statement, or basically issued the Super League statement, but put a line in at the bottom that said, the club remains fully committed to securing a place in Super League for 2026 season, whether through the IMG grading system or via the forthcoming application process. What was the reaction to that, Mike?
The club, the message was quite simple, really. The club are very confident, quietly going about the business, and happy where they're up to in terms of the IMG gradings. Obviously, it's been well documented that Widnes will be registering interest. From my point of view on things, I think that statement that you've just read out there, I think the club are damned if they do and damned if they don't. I think if they'd say we're not quite ready, I think people would criticise them, lack of ambition. We're a big club, we're Widnes, we should be in the conversation. But then when you go and put yourself out there and do that, people are quite easy in pointing out your league position and the way the season's gone. I think for me, if we're all honest, James, and realistic, I think I said last week we need to see who goes up, who's playing in the championship, what the championship looks like. And I think then there's a massive opportunity for Widnes to puff the chest out and say, right, we need to be dominant in this division now. We need to be top 4, top 3, whatever it looks like. And then there will be another restructure around the corner. There always is. And when that one comes up, that's when you need to be in pole position to try and compete for a place at the top.
Yeah, I think I agree in some parts of what you say. It's a positive that the club sort of come out and said that it's got the ambition. I agree with that side of things, but I think I'm not sure about quietly going about your business, because I just think, take Oldham for example. They're making noise regardless of what they've got there. They make noise. They state their ambitions. They've been quite big in their ambitions. They had ITV Granada down there as a result of this 14 club. They're clearly making steps to try and get themselves into the conversation. Whereas I just sort of feel like Widnes are hoping that they might be in the conversation. Look, the reality of the situation is Widnes are currently the 21st ranked team on the pitch. They're currently 22nd, I think, in the IMG. Now, we know that there was issues last year, and the reality is Widnes really were probably about 17th or 18th in the IMG criteria last season if you get rid of the nonsense that was, or the technicalities, or whatever you want to call it, that were missed. I just don't see where Widnes get anywhere near the top 12, to be honest. And I think the worry is, well, not the worry, and like you say, it's a difficult situation, because if you said it exactly right about damned if you do, damned if you don't, because if they say we're not going to, if we say, oh, actually, we don't think we're going to make it, then people will criticise you for that. But I think, without wanting to, well, don't want to get anyone's hopes up, I don't think, but I think I'd be extremely surprised if Widnes are anywhere near Super League in 2026, because I think the top 12 teams will probably include York, and then I would expect Bradford and London to be the other two that get picked.
Yeah, I agree with you in terms of who I think will be in that group. I do think it will be them 3 teams. Then there'll be a question mark over whether Toulouse make it or not, probably instead of London. But for my mind, call me cynical or whatnot, but I cannot get past Gary Everington just rocking up at London for them to miss out. I just don't see a world where that happens. And then obviously you've got all the talk around, Catalan anyway. Toulouse, for me, if they make it, they've got to be a top 12 IMG team for me, because all the conversations that people are having around Catalan, well, that applies to Toulouse tenfold, doesn't it?
Yeah, and we expect Salford to drop out, but who knows what might happen. I suppose the main frustration is that it'll be months until we do know what's what the situation is. I mean, I made this point somewhere. Timing is everything. Like 12 months ago, Widnes had just beaten Bradford at home.
Yeah.
We're fifth in the league, but we're within touching distance of second. Now, imagine you could rewind 12 months ago. And I know Widnes had a bit of a blip after that in August, but if you rewind that 12 months and you're having this discussion then, imagine if Widnes went on a run towards the end of the season and finished second or third in the table. All of a sudden, you would be in the conversation. The reason why Widnes aren't in the conversation is because ultimately it's not about, okay, we know about finances and some of the other clubs have got benefactors, etc. But the main reason Widnes aren't in the conversation 9 times out of 10 is because when people look at the championship table over the last 5-6 years, Widnes have been nowhere near. You only have to look at Oldham. Oldham have spent 3/4 of the last 20 years in the third division, but find themselves in fourth in the table now and competing with the top teams. So that means that when people are looking at the championship, they all of a sudden become in the reckoning. Well, Widnes haven't got better facilities than Oldham haven't got better facilities than Widnes. They've not got a better fan base than Widnes. Okay, they've got a guy putting money in, buying old Super League players and old Widnes players, but there's not what they offer isn't a great deal more than what Widnes offer, if at all. But they'll probably get a leg up because at the moment people look at them as a top 4 championship team.
They do, and the other thing, timing for that for Oldham, whether it'll come too soon for Oldham remains to be seen. But there is that Manchester area box, isn't there? And if Salford are dropping out and Oldham are on the rise, there is that little caveat as well. But you are bang on there. If we was in form and towards the top of the championship, putting pressure on in terms of the league table wise, for them 2 places even that are selected, there's a lot to be desired about Widnes still. For teams in Super League, we're bang close to a lot of teams, so you're guaranteed, we'll take away fans to Wigan, St Helens, Warrington, whoever else. So that's a big thing for Super League clubs. There's a guaranteed player pool, because you'd think if we did get promoted, hypothetically, that would kickstart the process of the youth development programme and potentially getting an academy back. And that's obviously in the works. So you're opening up a player pool that's already been proven, for many a years in the rugby league world, even prior to Super League days. There's a heritage at Widnes, there's a history, there's a story to be told. So there's a lot of things that if you was a bit further up and, like you say, you went on a run and you could put a bit of pressure on, you could go, hey, listen, this is what we're all about. And by the way, we've not got a bad stadium either.
The worry, I guess the other worry at the moment is, and I suppose the announcements come out and there's very limited information about what's going on. We're assuming that Magic Weekend's going to get the elbow. But at the moment, we don't actually know what the setup's going to be after this year. So, yeah, they'll end up with 14 teams. But then what happens after that? Is it just going to be 14 teams forever? Is it still going to be on IMG? I think I said on Twitter the other day, if they're saying it's the top 12 on IMG and then they're just picking 2, whoever to go with them, well, surely in 12 months' time, them 2 that they've picked aren't going to get the elbow because they've just literally handpicked them. And I think that's probably a bigger worry for me at the moment, even speaking from a fan's point of view, is people will call me negative, whatever. I just like to deal with reality, to be perfectly honest. I don't think Widnes will be in Super League in 2026. What concerns me is what prospects have Widnes got of being in Super League in 2027 or 2028, because at least, as much as I don't like the IMG criteria, at least when it was, at least before this announcement, you were like, well, we know that if Widnes could get their act together and maybe someone with a bit of money comes in, puts some in, they could get somewhere. Stuart said, to be fair, they had a 5-6 year plan to get to the 15 points that guarantees you a Super League spot. What worries me at the moment, and nobody knows, and it'd probably be 6 months until we do know, what worries me at the moment is if we don't make the cut for 2026, or if Widnes don't make the cut for 2026, is that it?
I get what you're saying, James, but also to be kind of straight to the point and cynical as well. This is rugby league, and since I've been alive, born in 1997, how many league restructures and how many different ways of doing things have we had? We've had promotion and relegation, we've had licensing, we've had Super 8, we've had 14, we've had 12, we're going back to 14. I just thinking if the expected outcome comes, which I think personally, Widnes won't be a part of the Super League, but I think that's where Widnes have got to take the opportunity then of let's drive this club forward. Them teams are out the way. Where Toulouse are, we're not sure, but these are the group of teams who will be competing against them. We should be right at the top of that list on and off the field. So when there is a restructuring next time, we can put the pressure on. Or if there isn't a restructuring and we're getting better year on year on year on year, like teams have in the past, put the pressure on for there to be a restructure. You're never too far away of a disaster in rugby league, and you only look at Huddersfield. We've not spoke about them, but they're playing in Halifax next year. If it's not for Ken Davey, what's going on at that club? And there's always opportunities around the corner, and I think personally, it going to 14 and Widnes remaining in the championship, if it's planned correctly, I actually think that's a positive for Widnes, and I really think it's an opportunity to drive forward and improve on where we have been in the last 5 or 6 years.
Well, of course, Super League going up to 14 has an impact on the championship because you would imagine that, well, 2 championship teams will be stepping up to Super League unless they're going to pull a complete left field new club out of somewhere, which I wouldn't necessarily rule out. But so that would leave you with, well, 11, I suppose, because there's 13 in it this season. There's how many's in the other one? Is it 10 in the?
Yeah.
Is it 10 in the League One? Now you would assume if Toulouse don't make Super League, they'll be off. I just can't see a business case that says Toulouse carry on playing in the Championship if they don't make Super League this time. Because if they don't make it this time, they're never going to make it. Now there's this discussion going on about the merger of Championship and League One, which I guess Super League going to 14 teams, you probably have to say makes that more likely. Because I guess you'd go down to 21 teams across 2 leagues. I think that's fair to say. Obviously, that goes down to 20 if Toulouse pull out. And then they're talking about this East-West sort of situation. But perhaps the most interesting thing is that these promotion playoffs they've got lined up, the Super 8s they've got lined up this year, the bottom 4 Championship and the bottom 4 League One, could actually be redundant because if there is no Championship next season, well, what on earth are they playing for?
Yeah, 100%. And more importantly, for where we're languishing at the moment is the lack of income for the sides who are playing neither in them Super 8, whatever you want to brand it, playoffs or the top playoffs, for the top 6 places. You've got a group of teams there that we've already spoke about earlier on in the season, the challenges for Widnes of not having a home game for so long. What are the challenges, around not having a game beyond a certain point financially as well? It is a lot.
What do you think? So, what do you think about that? Because the teams 7, 8th, and 9th their season will be done, but the teams 10, 11, 12, 13 will all have an extra 4 games, 2 of which will be at home. Do you feel like? I mean, I know what side of the fence I sit on this, but do you almost feel like it's better for a club to finish in the bottom 4 so they get the extra 2 home games?
I understand the reason why, and I think if we're all being honest, look, everybody's the ever professional, aren't they? And I don't think you get your head coach or your chairman saying we want to finish there rather than a place higher because we get 2 more games where we get income. But fundamentally, you will get more income by probably doing that.
There's another argument that says there's also the risk of players getting injured, and if it becomes a dead game, and and you lose a player who then misses start next season. But go on.
But yeah, they are going to be dead games anyway. Look, for me, as a fan, you want to finish as high as possible. And I'd much rather us have a crack at winning as many of our next games from now to the end of the season as possible and try and claw back, some league positions and see how far you go. But people in my mind would be forgiven for wanting the extra 2 home games. I do understand that, but again, this is rugby league, isn't it? And this is how farcical it is. But here we are.
What do you think about the East-West thing? Because I must have. Well, I obviously hear things. I hear things, and they're calling it an East and West split, but I don't foresee that happening. I effectively think it will be a Yorkshire League, and then everyone else will be put in.
Well, yeah.
I mean, because the thing is, I just don't see a situation where they don't have Halifax and Bradford as. Well, I suppose Bradford's a bad example, but I just don't see a situation where they're telling Halifax you've got to go and play with all the teams in the West because we've actually got too many Yorkshire teams. So I would expect it to basically be all the Yorkshire teams in one league, and then the other league would be the Cumbrian teams, Widnes, Oldham,
The Travellers
Rochdale, Swinton, Crusaders, Midlands, and then because London you'd expect they're going to be in Super League. Newcastle can play with the Yorkshire teams, but I think Widnes would be one of the big losers, in my opinion, of that. And just because I feel like you'll end up playing, with all due respect, Midlands and North Wales, as opposed to playing Bradford and Halifax, as an example. I think they're talking about it'd be the top 4 in each league would then play in the playoffs. I suppose, but on the flip side of that, you could say, making the case for what you were saying earlier, does it then become an opportunity where Widnes are looking at it thinking, well, we'll have Salford and Oldham, but other than that, we should be, well, North Wales will probably say that they'll be up there, but does it then become an opportunity where Widnes could look at it and be like, well, we're going to try and dominate this West Conference and finish top year after year after year and maybe build that up? What do you think?
I don't like the concept of splitting sides into whatever conference. I mean, speaking from a Widnes point of view, you are right. It would be more or less a Yorkshire League, and then what I call and brand the Travellers League, where you've got to go to God knows wherever, and then one set of people probably won't even have to. One set of teams won't have to even probably buy a player's bus if for some games, whereas Widnes could potentially be going up Cumbria down to London if they're still in the mix, because there's no guarantee that they won't be in the championship. Then you've got to lose. Say we're wrong, James. Say if there's a world where they don't get in Super League but they carry on in the British League, what conference do they go in? So it's got the capabilities of being a mess, but it's hard to call until you know what sides are going to be participating and what they're not. But for what it's worth, the original idea I don't like, and I also think by separating potentially, say, Featherstone and Halifax away from Oldham and Widnes, say, you think that them, a couple of sides on each side would be the more competitive sides in the division. You're keeping them separate, but that's what you want. You want to see a race, don't you, through the season of them sides pushing and competing at the top, where we almost feel you're going to have, like, say, a handful of League One clubs and a handful of Championship clubs through together. You're going to get some blowout score lines in both sides until you get to the playoffs, and then it's all on. But as we know, that when you get to that point, injuries dictate, and I just think it's messy once again, and I think it's unnecessary, and I think there should be a better way of doing things.
I understand there's a meeting on Monday where they're going to discuss it and see what they come up with. My worry is that rather than clubs like Widnes being in the Championship and that dragging them closer to Super League, I almost feel like this format drags it the other way. You almost get dragged down to the level of maybe the League One teams, and no disrespect to the League One teams because they've improved this season, but rather than the top championship clubs pushing each other to get better to become close to Super League, I think you end up with a point where everyone's retracting to sort of a middle ground where the League One and championship clubs almost meet so they're competitive with each other. And I think that's where, I mean, I have sympathy with the clubs because it's like you're basically signing players for next season. You've got no idea what league you're going to be in. You've got no idea what teams. You've got no idea how many games you're going to play. How on earth are the club? How on earth are the club meant to budget? You don't. They don't even have a clue how many home games are they going to play next season. Nobody has a Scooby Doo.
Going back to the meeting on Monday, that is an important factor in terms of recruitment for next year for all clubs, and certainly sides who were in that conversation. Hypothetically, Widnes, Oldham, Toulouse, York. You're gambling on recruitment, but you could be left with a mess. You could be left with a massive wage bill, and it's so hard for clubs to navigate that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all comes out. And I don't. I would imagine there'll be plenty of twists and turns.
My fear, James, is next year. Look, we're all kind of used to getting not many away supporters at the Widnes ground, but I don't want to be going in a conference system to. And no disrespect to any club when I say this, but I don't want to be going to some of these places, mate, where for the majority of the season there's more Widnes fans than the home team, and I just feel that's the way it's going.
Yeah, well, we'll have to keep our ears close to the ground to see what's going on. I've no doubt that there'll be something coming out on Monday with regards to what's going on with that. Well, moving on to players, because I know we've had a question about this. Widnes' squad situation, the contract situation for next season. So we've done a little bit of homework. Let me move him out of the way. We've done a little bit of homework, and by my count, Widnes have got 15 players currently under contract for next season. 15 of the existing players. Lewis Hall could be the 16th. There is an option on his contract for 2026. So this is based on what's being announced previously. So as you mentioned, Liam Bent was announced this week. Nick Gregson, Danny Langtree, and Dan Murray are all contracted to the end of 2027. So they've got another 2 seasons after this one. Matty Fozzard is contracted up to the end of 2028. So he's got another 3 seasons after this one. The other players under contract for 2026 are Mike Butt, Joe Edge, Matt Fleming, Tom Gilmore, Ryan Ince, Jordan Johnston, Adam Lawton, Jake Mason, Morgan McWhirter, and Jack Owens. So that leaves 8 players, we reckon, who are due to be out at the end of their deals in 2025. Brett Bailey, we've not really seen. Gavin Benyon, Ben Condon, who recently signed, we expect him to go to Super League club next season. Rodri Lloyd, Joe Lyons, Dec Patton, we believe. It didn't mention his contract length when Widnes signed him, but we've just assumed it was a 1-year deal. Max Roberts and Reece Williams. You'd have to say of those 8 that are out of contract that Max Roberts needs to be the priority to get signed up, Mike. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Look, I don't know what budget the club work with specifically and how many players that can afford, but we're speaking about it where we're sat in the league table today. You don't know what's going to happen in the games still to come. And I think you've got to leave yourself some room to freshen things up. I think last season we made the playoffs, which was great, 5th place finish. But the one constructive criticism of last year, we wasn't scintillating in attack. We was a very dogged team who'd hang in there, never say die, but you never cut loose. And obviously, we're in a very similar situation this year in terms of, struggling to score points, and obviously a minus goal difference. So I think you've got to leave yourself a decent amount of budget to improve them things. Certainly in the outside backs, I think the half backs, freshening that up, I think is really a priority for me. Whether that be one or two coming in, we'd be unsure. Certainly some of the outside backs, but also as well, mate. Definitely, we need some front rowers in as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's only really Dan Murray at the moment. Certainly, props have got to be top of the shopping list. There was a newspaper link this week with Will Roberts. Will Roberts out of contract at St Helens. I'm not sure. Well, I think he might end up at Widnes, possibly from elsewhere next season. It'd be a great coup if Widnes can sign him, but I would expect one, maybe Lee or another Super League team to take him. Is there a concern with Will Roberts that? Do you think Will Roberts could play with Tom Gilmore, or are they too similar?
Well, it's interesting that because I had a very similar conversation with my dad actually at the weekend, and I think if I'm right in saying, I'm going to paraphrase it, and look, apologies to Alan if he hasn't said this, but I'm sure when he first come to Widnes, Alan mentioned him about having a running game, but obviously in that Toulouse game, he was playing next to Joe Lyons. Then I suppose Deck Patton and Tom Gilmore, they're similar, and he played with him, the last two games. But I just think where it'd be interesting with Tom and Will is for Tom to be effective, he needs to be first receiving hands on the ball. But I also think Will Roberts needs to, and I think he's got a cracking kicking game. So maybe there is a world because Tom Gilmore's deficiencies is probably his long kicking game and a bit of zip and speed out wide. So maybe a little bit of a change in the styles, and you could match them up quite well.
I'll just caveat that I would have absolutely no problems if Widnes is 6 and 7 next season with Gilmore and Roberts. I'd have no problems with that whatsoever. How likely it is that Widnes will get Will Roberts remains to be seen. You would expect they've got a better chance if Max Roberts stays as well. So maybe that's part of the discussion.
There was actually a bit more information about there might be maybe a bonus player that might be involved in with the club next year. It was revealed Alan has been massively impressed with one lad specifically from the youth development program that's been going on. Zach, I believe he's played for the England Community Lions, and he's been playing with his community club, and he's been getting rave reviews. So I think Alan was really keen on, if a Super League club or a club that he's going into Super League doesn't come in for him, that he's really keen on having him training alongside the first team next year. So if that does happen, I think that's a success, given that we're really in year one of that as well.
Well, I mean, I think fans would always prefer to see you give your own players a run rather than draft them in from elsewhere. And with Super League increasing next season, there'll probably be even less players kicking around, less young players kicking around for clubs like Widnes to take on loan. So I think you'd rather see your own players from your own system coming through than having to rely on Warrington or whoever to send you the right players. So yeah, we'll keep an eye on that one. Right, before we let you go, let's round off the predictions. I have to say that I got full house last week, Mike.
You did?
Which means I've now shortened your lead to 2.
Clawing on.
As we head
let me down.
As we head into August. Full programme this week, all on Sunday. Oh, no, I'm telling a lie. There's a game on Friday night. It's Bradford against Halifax. Now, Halifax has been playing at home, playing their home games at Odsal as well, so they'll be familiar with the pitch.
I've got to be honest, I wasn't massively impressed with Bradford at the weekend. I think there's a world where they might not even get in the grand final. Look, I'm not being, it's not sour grapes. There was the better team on the day, just about. But given our injury situation and the money at their disposal, they
It,
didn't massively impress me.
it certainly helped the conspiracy theory if Bradford won the championship this season, and I think the same also goes to York. I think if York or Bradford end up in Super League next season, having not won the grand final, I think they'll always have that cloud over them where
Yeah,
it's like, oh well, especially maybe less so York, but certainly Bradford, they'll always have that Nigel Wood shadow over them. But if they win the grand final, I think you turn around and say to them, well, fair play, you know what I mean? They've won the thing.
yeah,
Yeah, okay, there wasn't automatic promotion, but in my opinion, the team that wins it should go in, and that's what's happened. And I think, yeah, certainly they, considering the players that they've got, you would expect them to be able to. You would expect them to maybe have looked better than they did against Widnes, but having said that, they won by 12 points. I think Bradford will beat Halifax.
yeah. I'd say that's the lines I was going down, mate. To be fair.
Batley Featherstone.
Featherstone for me. I thought there'd have been a little bit more of a bounce by Batley under John Kay, but I think probably this year is probably a telling thing with Batley of the budget and the miracles that they've been working, where miracles only go so far. So I think Featherstone, I think they're coming on strong now, and they could upset a few in the playoffs if they carry on. So I'm going Featherstone.
Yeah, I have to say, Paul Cook's done a really good job at Featherstone. I wasn't sure about the appointment of him in the first instance, but he's really they've really kicked on and perhaps highlighted how much they were underachieving under James Ford. I wonder whether Batley have realised that there's going to be no relegation, and actually, Kevin Nicholas, he's one of the hot shots, isn't he, amongst the championship chairmen? And I wonder whether he's keeping his powder dry because he knows that there's not going to be any relegation. Yeah, I'll go Featherstone. Doncaster, Hunslet. Doncaster on a really good run of form and are now in the top six.
So yeah, I think I said last week, didn't I? I said they'd be the side instead of Widnes who'd make the last playoff spot. So I've got to nail my colours to the mast and obviously stick with that. As for Hunslet, I think they just want to go on the beach, don't they?
Yeah, interesting. Interesting about Hunslet is, are they an argument against promotion and relegation? Because of course they came up this season having beat Swinton in that playoff thing, whatever it was at the end of last season, and they've really struggled as a result this season. You know, they've recruited late and um, they recruited late and didn't have the strongest team.
But again, James, though, like let's have it right though. They finished fourth in League One, and
Yeah.
that's a lot of people's gripe. It's a huge gap. And it's like again rugby league doing things difficult. Like I know there's a bit of afters with Widnes and Swinton of what happened last year, but Swinton shouldn't have gone down fundamentally.
Yeah, no, that's a fair comment. Um, London Broncos against Barrow.
Oh God, phew, that's a hard one to call. A Barrow away.
Yeah, it's at London.
Look, Barrow, they're chasing the playoffs, aren't they? This is really difficult. This is really, really difficult because London have put in some really impressive performances, and then then you're left scratching your head with them when you back them. So I think I've got to just go for the playoff chasing Barrow and hoping that they're going to keep the pressure on.
I'm going to go London for that.
I think you could get a point back again there. That I'm not comfortable calling that, but my gut
Well,
instinct's Barrow.
well, and of course, this has a big impact. Well, everyone will be looking at London's result. We was looking at London last week when they were beating Featherstone at half time because London, of course, are the team nearest Widnes at the moment. Widnes away at Sheffield.
I'm,
As
I'm
as you said before, Widnes not got a great record at Sheffield, but Sheffield haven't really got a great record anywhere this season. They've only won 4, albeit Widnes have only won 6, but at least Widnes have had the 2 draws as well.
well, we're coming up against a side that It's chaos. It is chaos at Sheffield. I feel sorry for Craig Lingard, and I hope he doesn't cop it at the end of the year, because from my belief and my little understanding about it, it's not his fault, and there's a lot to be sorted out. Certainly with the player roster, there's a lot of players who are going to be moved on, a lot of new players coming in. Obviously, seen Danny Craven and Martin Riley are there now, and that's just going to keep changing. So I think, again, another side who probably can't wait for the season to finish. I think as for Widnes, I think, and Alec Coleman saying, that I think you could say the same about us a little bit now, but I think we have more about that. I think the side will want to finish strongly and answer a few critics potentially, and go on a run. Ben Condon will be another game in. We've got Adam Lawton, we've got weapons, and that horrendous record has got to change at some point. So I'm going for a Widnes win.
I'll go for a Widnes win as well.
I was going to say, don't be greedy, because you'd be
I am.
Widnes.
Yeah, I am tempted to go to Sheffield. I am tempted to go to Sheffield, thinking that it could be a way that I could drag another point back on you. But we'll see. We'll see and hope that Widnes can do it this weekend. And then the final game is York against Oldham. York are on a terrific winning run, and are now, having signed Paul Vaughan, surely going to be in Super League next season, no matter what. Even if they don't make the 12 and IMG, you would expect, are they going to be a strategic choice?
Yes. York win. I think the only thing to add to that, I think they'll keep marching on, and they took a bit of a good hiding first game of the season, didn't they, at Boundary Park? So I think Mark Applegarth will be bookmarking this one for a big performance, so a York win.
What's really interesting about this week is that if that does happen and York beat Oldham, Featherstone would only be 2 points behind Oldham, which, considering how Featherstone started the season, is a massive credit to Featherstone, because if they get within 2 points of the top four, all of a sudden Oldham are nervously looking over their shoulder, when I thought, like most people, that top four was pretty much boxed off. But Featherstone keep winning. I mean, Doncaster, to be fair, because Doncaster are 4 points behind Oldham, but have a game in hand. So, maybe the top four isn't done, but we'll see. Mike, thanks for your company as always. Thanks everyone for listening. Safe trip to Sheffield this weekend if you're going. Please do like, subscribe, review, whatever it is you do on the Apple Podcast, Spotify, Audio Boom, wherever you listen. Do get us on the widnesrugby.com website. The forum's on there as well. And on the Facebook page, Widnes Rugby League fans. But from myself, James Gordon and Mike Parsons, that's all for this week.